All right, what is up, everybody? We are back with another edition of Everyday Hoops. Hope you guys are having a good one. Today, I'm going to talk about the duo of LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. Those guys have been on absolute fire recently, particularly the last couple games. I'm going to break it down, go into depth, and talk about why this duo has been so amazing, why it could be great in the future. That's what we're doing here in today's video. Thank you guys for the views on the videos and the shorts recently. I really appreciate it. If you do like the content around here, consider subscribing, like, turn notifications, do all stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. Really upset a lot. Join the membership. If you want to learn more about the membership, there's a video on my channel explaining all of it. You can go back and watch that. Link to my Twitters, all that stuff down in the description below. And yeah, don't waste any more of your time. Let's get right into it. So the duo of LaMelo and Brandon Miller, those guys have been on fire recently for the Charlotte Hornets. Unfortunately, it's not resulting in a lot of wins, but it's still been very, very good. Looking at it, this really spawned from a 2-game stretch that they had. One against Detroit. Last Thursday, they had a game against Detroit, which they won in overtime, where LaMelo had 35 and Brandon Miller had 38. And those guys were absolutely dominant. Then the next game, they played against the Milwaukee Bucks. That's the game where LaMelo had 50, Brandon Miller had 32. And they scored 30 plus in back-to-back games, became the second youngest duo in NBA history to score 30 points each in back-to-back games, only behind Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, KD and Russ. But particularly in the last 4 games, these two have been on fire. Fortunately, they're 1-3 in those games, but those two have been really good, whether it's either one of them or both of them. Looking at the last 4 games, lost by 1 to Brooklyn, where Brandon Miller dropped 29. LaMelo had a bad game in that game, only 12 points, but Brandon Miller popped off and gave 29, and they only lost by 1. That's also the game where LaMelo Ball got benched in that one. Then against Detroit, again the game, Brandon Miller had 38, 7 and 4, 4 steals. LaMelo gave you 35, 6 and 9. They combined to hit 12 threes, and they ended up getting one in overtime. LaMelo fouled out of that game, but Brandon Miller closed it out. Then we go against Milwaukee, where they lost by 6. LaMelo gave you 50, 5 and 10. Brandon Miller gave you 32, 11 and 3. They combined for 12 threes in that game as well. And then the last game against the Magic, LaMelo gave you 44, 9 and 7. Brandon Miller gave you 20 and 10, and they lost. They only put up they put up 64 of the 84 Hornet points in that game. Yeah, those two have been amazing. We know what LaMelo has done. LaMelo Ball has been just absolutely crazy this season, but Brandon Miller has really stepped up. He had a slow start to his second season after having a really good rookie year. Had a slow start to this season, but also he did miss a lot of games due to injury. He had a hip injury suffered in the first game of the season, and that messed him up a little bit. He missed a couple games, but he's gone back into the flow of things. In the last 4 games, Brandon Miller's giving you almost 30 points per game with almost 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals on 51, 51, 92 shooting splits. So last 4, he's giving you 30 per game, basically. And he has been just a lights out, shooting the ball crazy. I mean, 51, 51, 92 is insane shooting. He's been really good. LaMelo in the last 4 games give you 35, 5, and 7 with a steal on 45, 34, 81 shooting. In the last 3, he's giving you like 44 points per game. He had that game against Brooklyn that really messed up the stats. But so combined, in the last 4 games, these two have combined to give you about 65 points per game, which is insane. They combined for about 65 points. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and particularly for the rest of the team, in the last 4 games, this is how the scoring has gone. LaMelo and Brandon Miller combined for 41 of the 115 in the game against Brooklyn. In the Detroit game, they combined for 73 of the 123. Milwaukee game, they combined for 82 of the 119. And last night against Orlando, they combined for 64 out of 84 points, meaning the last 4 games, those two combined to score 260 out of 441 points, which means 59%. So LaMelo and Brandon Miller are combined for 59% of the team's points in the last 4 games, meaning out of 10 times they score, almost 6 out of those 10 times, it's going to be LaMelo or Brandon Miller putting the ball in the cup, which kind of makes sense when you think about it like that, because, I mean, who else? I mean, especially also Miles Bridges has missed 3 of these last 4 games as well, which is another guy that can give you 20 points when you need him to. So that makes a lot of sense. But those two have been just absolutely phenomenal over the last couple games. It's been really, really cool to see. Also, it hasn't just been, all right, your turn, my turn. It does get to that at some point. It gets to a point where it's like, all right, LaMelo, do your thing. Brandon Miller, all right, do your thing. But also, those two have really played well together on the court. Like, I remember a play against Detroit in like the third quarter, I want to say, where LaMelo was on the wing. They're dribbling around. LaMelo threw a cross-court pass to Brandon Miller, who wasn't even in the spot yet. Brandon Miller was coming off a screen. LaMelo threw a perfect dime right to Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller just caught it, shot it, you know? And that's been a big thing, too, the three-pointers. These two guys let it fly. LaMelo takes 12 threes and Brandon Miller takes 9 threes. They combine to take about 22 three-pointers a game for those two. And they're both shooting the ball. I mean, they're combined making 8. So they're making 8 out of 22 three-pointers per game, those two, which 8 threes, that's 24 points right there to add to your team. And they're both decent shooter. I mean, Brandon Miller shoots 37%, LaMelo shoots 35%, which is about average numbers, but then again, also with the volume that they're taking, that's pretty good numbers, and you want those two to be shooting because those two are both guys that could get hot at any point in time and they can just pop out and do stuff. But overall, in the entirety of the season, LaMelo is giving you 31, 5, and 7. He's probably going to be an all-star, all-NBA type guy. Brandon Miller is now giving you almost 20 points per game with 5 rebounds, almost 4 assists, 1.5 steals. So they're combining for about 50 points per game average. And those two have just been an elite, amazing duo. Last year we saw Brandon Miller as a rookie really take a lot of strides, and a lot of that was with LaMelo Ball being injured. Brandon Miller had a lot more on his plate and a lot more opportunity to show out. Now with LaMelo back, it was going to be interesting, like, all right, how well is Brandon Miller going to do? And at first it was kind of like, okay, how is Brandon Miller really going to fit in? But now he's really fitting in as a shooter. That was one of his best attributes coming out of Alabama. His three-point shooting was amazing, and it's shown. He's an elite three-point shooter, especially, off the dribble, catch and shoot, all of that. He can shoot the three ball very well. And now when LaMelo's doing his thing, it's another kick-out option to Brandon Miller, but also they've been running a good two-man where it's like, all right, LaMelo, LaMelo just is in control of the ball so much that sometimes use him as a decoy, and then it's like, all right, Brandon Miller, it's your turn. And they use Brandon Miller a lot with the bench unit. When LaMelo takes his rest, it's going to be Brandon Miller and the bench guys, and Brandon Miller's going to get a lot of opportunity, where he gets to get in his bag, step back or off the screen, three-pointers, pull up mid-ranges, getting to the basket. He's been doing that a lot as well recently, and it's been doing really good. And we know what LaMelo Ball can do. But these two are just such a exciting duo. I mean, LaMelo has been probably maybe the most exciting player in the NBA this season. It's been so fun to watch LaMelo ball out this year. But then Brandon Miller, what he adds to this team, in terms of being a 6'9" forward that can go get buckets, like, it's so exciting having a guard, wing. Well, Brandon Miller also can be a 2 as well. He's not just a 3. He could play the 2 as well, but Josh Green has started at the 2. He's been shooting the 3 ball pretty solid, and he brings some defense. But these two have just been an electric scoring duo. They're putting up the threes, which they're in today's times where they're just throwing up three-pointers, and you want those two to be throwing up threes because they go in. They both can get to LaMelo Ball. I think what's really unlocked him in the last couple games is that he's been able to get to the basket a lot more. He's not just relying on shooting 15 threes a game, which he still does sometimes, but LaMelo has been a lot more aggressive in terms of getting to the rim and getting layups and getting his own shot at the basket, But Brandon Miller also is a guy that, even though he does prefer probably to be a catch and shoot or be a shooter from the 3 and from the mid-range, he also has the length and the body and the ability to get to the basket as well. So they're putting pressure on the rim. They're shooting the lights out from 3. They're 2 guys that can get hot when they need to. Both guys that can handle the ball as well. Brandon Miller has been solid in terms of handling the ball in certain situations. And it's just been so fun to watch this duo. Unfortunately, they're not winning. They're 6-11, sitting at number 12 in the Eastern Conference. So it would be nice to see them actually win these games when they're combining for 70 and 65 points. It would be really cool to see that. But, just seeing these two out here together really helps because I do a series after the end of every season called The Look-In. And last week, the Charlotte Hornets, a lot of that, like the plot, I guess, that's the only way I can say it, of that video was talking about how LaMelo needs to be healthy because the Hornets won't be able to move on to their future and figure out what pieces fall into place without LaMelo Ball. Because, yes, Brandon Miller had a really good season last year, but what if he doesn't fit in with LaMelo Ball? Some of these guys have really good seasons last year and have some bright potential, but it's like, we know LaMelo is going to be the centerpiece of this team. Because when LaMelo's healthy, he can do stuff great, and now we're seeing it this year. So it's like, how are they really going to fit in? How are the pieces going to... Hornets are still in a kind of a phase where they're trying to figure out the pieces. Like, all right, who's going to be the future of this team? Who's going to be help us lead us back to, the playoffs and stuff like that? And if LaMelo's not there, it's going to be really, really tough to know who the pieces are going to be, because we know LaMelo is going to be the centerpiece of this. He's going to be the leader of it. Now it's just how do we put the pieces in place for him to be able to thrive and be a good team. And so far, we're getting healthy LaMelo, and we're getting Brandon Miller now finally kind of stepping up, finally getting hot, and finally showing how elite this duo can be. And they're still super young. I mean, they're 22 and 23 years old. So they are still super, super, super young, man. And they're like, it's going to be so fun watching this team really come out and ball, you know? Like these two have been on fire. Hope this keeps us up. I don't know how many games they're gonna win. They have a lot of injuries right now. So it's gonna be the LaMelo and B Miller show. We gotta find a duo name. We gotta find a name for this duo. Um, I think maybe a couple more games of them doing this, and then we'll kind of figure it out. But we gotta find a name for this duo. And I hope they just continue to keep going, continue to keep stepping up, rising up, and playing some really, really good and fun, entertaining basketball. But yeah, it's gonna be it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, if you do like the content around here, consider subscribing, like, turn notifications, do all stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. Really upset a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow.